Today, we're pulling back the curtain to see what's really going on in the tech job market, what's causing it, and what the future looks like. I'm Josh, software exec, former engineer, founder, and consultant, and on this channel, we crack open the secrets of the software industry. So I've worked on both sides of tech hiring, from engineering teams to management, and I've seen how the market has shifted drastically in just a few years. Today, we're diving into the forces behind the changes, what they mean for both engineers and for companies. We'll break down what's really happening behind the scenes, why companies are changing how they hire, and what the shakeup looks like across the entire industry. So to start, what happened? A few years ago, tech felt unstoppable, right? The market was booming, startups were on fire, and even big tech roles seemed endless. But that period of so-called hyper growth created a hidden problem. That problem was oversaturation. Right? Companies hired aggressively during the boom years, sometimes without a clear long-term plan. And the result was more engineers on the market than it could sustain. If you add in a booming global remote work culture and offshoring consulting firms, suddenly supply far outstrips the demand in many, many areas. See, back in 2021, startups were hiring hundreds of engineers at once in this kind of like perpetual growth mindset. Some were just hiring for the sake of growth, because they had extra capital that they needed to expend and figured the more we pour into engineering, the more we're investing in features and more growth. But then the market cooled, right? And suddenly those teams were way, way oversized for their market share and struggling to find meaningful work, which led to downsizing and then layoffs. And this oversaturation, it's not just anecdotal, right? Some reports suggest that the number of engineers in the US increased by nearly 25% over just 2 years, while the demand has kind of leveled off, and that's a huge mismatch between the two. Another big shift is that recruiting itself has changed. AI now screens hundreds or thousands of resumes in just seconds, right? And the effect here isn't just about efficiency, it's changing who even gets a chance at the job. 2 engineers could apply to the same remote role with the only difference being the formatting of their resume, right? But the AI will flag one and just completely ignore the other. And it's not because one is more skilled, but because the algorithm was trained on patterns that it thinks represent success. So from a hiring perspective, managers rely on AI to filter candidates because human review at that scale is virtually impossible. Thousands of applications per position. When you're hiring several positions at once, it's just not feasible. Look, I've seen hiring managers literally divide their stack of paper resumes in half and toss one out at random because there's just too many to look at. And AI is at least putting some logic behind that initial cut, although it does mean that many talented engineers never get seen simply because it doesn't fit the pattern. But it's not just candidates who are adjusting. Companies are rethinking their growth and hiring strategies. So big flashy roles aren't necessarily the focus anymore. Instead, the emphasis is on sustainable, measurable growth, right? So large tech firms, they're freezing hiring in some departments, but doubling down in others where they're seeing that long-term potential. And mid-sized and smaller companies are investing more in core teams, sometimes local, sometimes hybrid, to maintain their stability. And that's why we're seeing a lot more local or smaller firms rise in prominence, because they're steady, right? They're resilient and less exposed to global market swings. Here's where we're at now with all these changes that are reshaping the industry. Fully remote roles promised a lot of freedom, but global competition and economic realities are kind of pushing back on some companies and switching more to a local or hybrid model. Also, startups and unicorns are struggling to maintain their massive teams, while smaller or more regional companies are becoming more attractive, not necessarily for prestige, but for the reliable and growth potential. And beyond resumes, AI is also influencing team structures. So performance monitoring and even project planning, engineers are competing not only with their peers, but also with kind of algorithmically optimized processes. Some companies now use AI just to predict team structures and which are the most efficient or flag underperforming processes. And this creates, it's a more data-driven and sometimes less forgiving environment, but I think it's too early to tell whether these types of processes will be a detriment or an improvement to the industry overall. I think they need some time, a little bit more time maturing. From the candidate's perspective, these changes can feel very disorienting. There's fewer roles and the competition is higher, right? The path to a dream job, it's not linear anymore. It's not just about being a great engineer. A lot of it is now about timing, alignment with the company priorities, and sometimes just plain luck. So with all that being said, where is the industry headed? Smaller, local, or even mid-sized companies are going to continue to grow. Engineers and managers are both valuing consistent growth over constant headlining titles. AI will continue to shape hiring and team dynamics, but human judgment is going to continue to play more and more of a key going forward as we begin to realize more of the limitations that AI really has in that process. Finally, engineers and companies are both adjusting their expectations, right? So remote work may remain common, but it's not always globally competitive. Big name roles still exist, but smaller, more sustainable opportunities are what's going to define the bulk of the market going forward. So all that's to say, the tech job market, it's not broken, but it is evolving. It's going through some rough years, figuring out exactly where it's going to stabilize, right? The boom years created a big oversaturation. AI changed hiring, and companies are adapting to this new reality. So engineers and managers alike are both now navigating a much less glamorous, but much more strategic landscape. So if you found that helpful, please like the video. If you've been impacted by the changing landscape of tech hiring, let me know in the comments. And if you'd like to see more videos on software and the tech industry, follow the channel. There'll be more coming soon.